Hi, everyone. Welcome to a panel on how to write a personal statement for the CLS and Boren Award, the CLS being the Critical Language Scholarship. I'm Isra, and I will be moderating today's panel. I myself am a CLS alum, so I'm really excited to be here. And we have two really great speakers for today's event. First up, we have Eileen Calub. And Eileen is an aspiring Foreign Service officer and a lifelong language lover. She's a third-year student at the University of Florida, pursuing a double major in international studies and linguistics with a minor in mass communication studies. She's a four-time recipient of U.S. Department of State / Defense scholarships for study abroad, including NISLE, CBYX, the CLS, and Boren. Eileen's regional focuses are Europe, Eurasia, and Southeast Asia. Primarily, her areas of interest are diplomacy, migrant rights, and Indigenous rights. As a Filipino American, she's also passionate about advocacy focusing on Asian American issues. So we're super excited to hear from Eileen. And then our second speaker following Eileen's presentation will be Kyle Cox. And Kyle is an outreach and recruitment manager with the Institute of International Education. He's been with IIE for 9 years, working in visa services for the Foreign Fulbright program for the first 5 years and doing outreach and recruitment for the Boren Awards for the past 4. As someone who loves to travel, he considers it a privilege to share awesome opportunities for study abroad with students who might benefit from an education that crosses borders. So with that introduction, I'd love to kick it off to Eileen, who's going to speak to us about the CLS application.
All right, let me just see if I can share my screen. All right, do you see it?
Yes.
Okay, great. So hello, everyone. My name is Eileen Calub. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am a Critical Language Scholarship Alumni Ambassador. I participated in the Fall 2020 Virtual Institute for the Study of Turkish in partnership with the Turkish and Foreign Languages Research and Application Center of Ankara University. I will be giving you all some tips on how to write a personal statement for the CLS program. First, I'd like to take a moment to thank the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs and Partners of the Americas, as well as the team of Department of State alumni who have put together this amazing conference. So on to essay considerations. For the personal statement, you need to keep these 3 questions in mind as you write. How does the CLS program and learning the language you are applying for contribute to your future career goals? What specific interests, experiences, or background do you possess that could make you a competitive applicant? And how can you show us that you will be successful in the rigorous academic and immersive environment of CLS? So when you read your essays, ask yourself, did I clearly address each of these questions? I'll delve deeper into how you can develop each of these sections of language and career goals, perspectives and background, and flexibility in preparation, each essential parts of the personal statement. So you should begin the application process by really considering your field of study and how it's related to the language you're applying to study with CLS. So even if it isn't something that one would necessarily think of to be related with going abroad or anything international, it will still have a connection. For example, when I applied, it wasn't too hard for me to figure that out because I want to become a foreign service officer, but there are plenty of folks who go into the CLS program from a variety of different fields, such as future doctors and future engineers. And there's always a way that learning a foreign language can apply to those industries. So take the time to really think about how linguistic and cultural competence can support you in the field. If you're having a hard time figuring that out, you don't have to come up with it yourself. You should conduct research on what people are doing in your field globally. Go on LinkedIn, network. There are a lot of alumni pages. So reach out to folks who have participated in CLS and Boren. See if there are people who are already in the job that you're shooting for, and ask them how they got to that position. And also keep in mind that CLS students come from a wide variety of disciplines besides international relations that aren't just like medical and engineering, but also include arts and the humanities, and all of these uh, come together with the applicant's language goals. So the link between language and career really is a foundational element of the CLS program. And not everyone knows exactly where they'd like to end up professionally, but this is a great chance for you as an applicant to show that you have ideas about the professional field you'd like to work in. So try to be ambitious in your application, but realistic, and also avoid generalities. All right, so the next one is perspective and background. So CLS scholars are diverse and come from all over the US from an array of backgrounds, cultures, and life experiences with all sorts of different interests and goals. One of the major goals of the US Department of State and the CLS program is to increase the number and diversity of American students participating abroad. So try to draw from your background and culture, and not only that, but find out what makes your life experiences unique and how that can serve as a way to uh, share like diplomacy abroad, because diplomacy isn't just like an ambassador going abroad, it's also people to people interaction. When you go abroad, you are sharing your culture with every single person that you meet, and that's a goal of the US Department of State. So keep that in mind. What will you be sharing? It's not just American culture as a whole. Think about your hometown. If you're from a certain region of the United States, for example, what I talked about is not only am I Filipino American, but I was raised in the South. I grew up in Kentucky and Florida. So those are certain things that you can talk about. So every student, regardless of their background, has a space to describe their own unique perspective and viewpoint. Successful applicants think about who they are, where they come from, what experience they might bring to the program, and how you might also benefit from sharing this experience abroad with other Americans who are different from yourself. So there really is a lot of things to tap into, and if you're having a hard time thinking about it, try to use maybe a map, write it down, write all uh, the things that are essential to your identity, and those are all things that you can share. Next is flexibility and preparation. The CLS program is an intensive group-based language and culture program. The classes are academically challenging, and even students with previous experience abroad have trouble adapting to an unfamiliar environment. So you need to show that you have concrete examples of success in the face of adversity. Try not to be vague. You should, specificity is better, like throughout the entire application, actually. Think back to the past when you really stepped out of your comfort zone and dealt with something that resulted in a good outcome, really, and acknowledge that the challenges you will face challenges abroad, and show how you will overcome those challenges. So it's impossible to write in the application and say, yeah, I won't have any challenges abroad, because that's unrealistic, and that's actually a bad sign for anyone reading your application, that you think that nothing could go wrong. It's important to go into it being aware that there will be challenges, language barriers, cultural differences, and to keep a realistic mindset and be specific with that, not just saying cultural barriers, but saying what kind of cultural barriers. Is it a difference in religion, a difference in food, etc. And also avoid two common mistakes: saying that you'll have a difficult time on program without addressing how you are prepared to adapt and succeed, and refusing to acknowledge challenges that all students face in a new environment. So, like I said, think about the problems that are likely to occur, and don't make it just um, general. Think about the problems that you might face. For example, um, if you're a vegetarian and the food in that culture tends to be very meat based, and say that present that as that could be a challenge, but also come up with ways that you can navigate that situation that shows that you can be adaptable, but also not at the same time compromise your values or practices necessarily. All right, before I wrap up, I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge that some folks may be feeling apprehensive or hesitant about potentially participating in the CLS program if it is in a virtual setting. As a former participant of a virtual institute from last fall, I can attest that the experience was extremely worthwhile, and I vastly improved both my speaking and comprehension skills by the end of the program. Of course, challenges do arise with technology, just like challenges would arise in an in-person setting, but I still developed meaningful relationships with my Turkish instructors, my language partner, and my cohort. You get out of it what you put into it, really. All right, that's all.
Thanks so much, Eileen. It was really great getting a chance to hear about kind of your perspective and the components that go into a really strong personal statement for the CLS. Now switching it over to Kyle, I already kind of read your background, but as a refresher, Kyle works for IIE, the Institute of International Education, and he's been working for recruitment for the Boren Awards for the past 4 years. I'm sure he'll be able to share some invaluable information with us all. All you, Kyle.
Thank you so much, Yusra, and thank you to We Represent for giving me this opportunity to come this afternoon, this evening, and to share some useful information about our Essay 2. We don't really call it a personal statement at Boren, but some of our essay is fairly similar to what you just heard from Eileen about the CLS essay. And so as we go on, I hope this can be an informative discussion on our Essay 2, where you can fill in that personal information, that personal statement, as well as some really useful information to help make a successful Boren application. A couple things to know: basic structure of a Boren Award application. We will need a study plan summary, so a basic plan for what you'll be doing while you're overseas. Language learning is a key component to Boren. What structure will you be using for that language learning in classroom or private tutoring, whatever the case might be. If you're planning on doing research while you're abroad on the Boren, that's totally fine. Strongly recommended, especially for fellowship applicants, for graduate students, that you include an abstract or methodology, just so we can understand the feasibility of what you're proposing and how it fits into your general Boren funded study abroad plan. Now there are 2 essays that make up the bulk of your application. Essay 1 is where you lay out some details regarding a national security argument that should be really central to your application. Some key issue that's relevant to your study abroad location where you plan to go overseas, that also has real implications to US national security and interests here of the United States. Essay 2, and this is where I'll spend the rest of this presentation, is where you get into your career-focused personal statement. And I really do have to stress a career focus. That's the real key that you're going to hear from me throughout the rest of this short presentation. When you open up the application, you pull up Essay 2, we give you some prompts. This is true for both of the essays. And this is what the prompts will look like. This is the specific information we want you to address. And I'll just say this as just like a general pro tip for our applications, for our essays. Do not skip a prompt. If we have specifically listed on the page, this is something we want you to address, you will doom your application if you don't address it. The prompts for Essay 2, your personal statement essay, are as follows. Please discuss the following points in one integrated essay, giving equal attention to each point. You can discuss the points in any order. First, think about a previous experience that has led to growth or a personal quality. Reflect upon it and describe how it will assist you in preparing to spend significant time overseas studying a critical foreign language and culture. Next, explain how the country and language you selected will help you achieve your career goals, including your plans to fulfill the federal service requirement. Be specific. If appropriate, you may also include relevant past experience, extracurricular, volunteering, internship, and professional experiences. I do have to pause here to make something very clear. You may know this already about the Boren Awards, but in case you don't, every Boren Award comes with a commitment on the back end to public service, to doing at least 12 months of service within the federal government in an internationally focused position, something that's relevant to national security after you've come back from your time overseas and after you finish your academic studies. That's a minimum service requirement of just 12 months that comes with every Boren application. So when you've come back from your time overseas, we will expect you to incorporate this 12 months or more of federal service into your long-term career plans. And here's where this essay too becomes a little more narrow and more specific than your generic personal statement. We need you to be explicit about that federal service plan. We need you to demonstrate that you've given thought to a key national security issue. Obviously, that's essay 1, but where you can see yourself addressing that issue, careers within federal service that make sense with your long-term career goals, your personal ambitions, make sense based on your prior academic training and your past experiences. You need to make it clear in essay 2 that you've given real thought to that federal service that we will require of you, and you have an idea in mind of where you can fulfill that service. Which then leads to the last prompt. As you will be committing to working for the federal government for at least 1 year, describe what makes you interested in federal service and what you will bring as a leader in the federal workforce. So basically there's 2 elements to that second essay. First, we need to see the personal growth and preparation for overseas study. And then we also need to see your plan for federal government careers and your leadership qualities that you will bring to that federal government career. When we're talking about your personal growth and preparation for overseas study, this is pretty open to just you selling yourself and making it clear to us that you can go overseas and that you're capable of learning a language. You don't need to have had any prior experience learning the language prior to applying for the Boren, but we need to see that you're committed to language learning and that you have the tools to learn a language while you're overseas, that you have cultural adaptability, that you have leadership skills, that you have the ability to overcome obstacles that you might face living in a new culture or being in a new environment. Those are the kind of things that we're looking for that personal statement side of essay 2. Just your adaptability, your leadership skills, your work ethic, and your commitment to learning the language. But then there's also the rest of essay 2 where you need to go into that plan for federal government careers. Really good tool to help with that thinking, that research about what sort of careers are out there is our website. We have a page up on our website, our federal careers page. We've got links to a wide variety of job boards. Check it out. Go see what people from your academic background are doing now. See what kinds of jobs might be of interest to you, might fit into your long-term professional goals and ambitions. That page on our website is a really useful tool as you start thinking about ways you might be interested in fulfilling your federal service. That's a really great place to get started with that research. We do have preferred agencies, areas of government that we're prioritizing, for lack of a better word, that really look good in an application when an applicant says they're thinking about working in one of these particular agencies or with one of their contractors. There's the Department of Defense, either military or civilian. Probably I believe it's the majority of people who win a Boren end up working in the DoD, but that does not mean you'll be a warfighter. There are lots of ways to fulfill service within the Department of Defense that do not require actually being on the front lines in a military position. There's military and civilian positions, lots of entry-level jobs within the DoD, and of course, it's one of the largest organizations on earth, so lots of entry-level positions. And lots of STEM positions as well, for those of you who are coming from a STEM background. There's the Department of State, which includes FEMA, the Coast Guard, Immigration Services, Homeland Security, which is FEMA, Coast Guard, Immigration Services. And FEMA, what's really great about the Homeland Security is that there are offices and locations nationwide. A lot of people think Boren's going to funnel you into working in DC. Not necessarily true, especially if you're thinking Homeland Security, lots of locations around the country. The Department of State, which includes USAID, as well as the Civil and Foreign Service, And then the intelligence community, all 18 agencies within the intelligence community. Great for those of you, again, who are coming from a STEM background, and for those of you with extensive language experience and who are specialists with a particular language. These are the agencies that really stand out to us, that we prefer. But just because these are the ones that are preferred doesn't mean that these are the only ones that are allowed. We have Borens fulfilling their service in dozens of other agencies all over the federal government. The trick here is you have to be able to convince us that it's connected to national security. And that's really what we're looking for. Are you doing some sort of work for that federal agency that is somehow tied to national security? And the good news is we at Boren have an incredibly open understanding of what's relevant to national security. So there are lots of opportunities to meet our service requirements with a wide variety of agencies, agriculture, commerce, CDC. One of my favorite Boren stories is a lawyer who got a job working in contracts and negotiations with other government agencies for our NASA. So again, just like really broad understanding of national security. And you just need to find a way to show us that the work for that agency meets some sort of national security concern. In that essay too, when it comes to that federal service and your long-term career goals, it's a good idea to demonstrate some basic career mapping, your short-term goals, plans for what you'll do immediately after coming back from your time overseas and after you finish your academic studies, going into like that medium length of time. And if you can think of it that far in advance, your long-term professional ambitions and career goals, your priorities as your career continues. So you want us you want to be able to show us as much of that career trajectory as you can in that essay too. Again, really important that you make it explicit. You have an interest in federal service and you are willing to serve that 12 months or more in a national security focused position within the federal government. Some basic do's or don'ts for our second essay. Do demonstrate enthusiasm for and an understanding of federal career opportunities. Do use concrete examples of maturity and leadership qualities. That again, going back to that more personal statement side of essay 2. Do complement your national security argument from essay 1. So we do want to see that the sort of service you're demonstrating an interest in essay 2 ties back to that national security issue that you go into detail in essay 1. And then finally, and I mentioned this before, give significant attention to all parts of the question. If we have asked you for a piece of information, please address it in your essay. Do not treat your federal career as an afterthought or detour. We need to see that you've given real thought and you have a real desire for fulfilling that service. Do not be too inflexible or too narrow in your career plan. So don't tell us like something so specific to one particular agency that we're now like, well, what if they don't get a job working for that particular agency? Are they just not going to complete their service? But then also don't be like, I want to work for the DoD. Because as I mentioned before, the DoD is enormous. You're going to need to narrow that down. And then don't focus more on your resume than your plan for the future. We do want to see what you've done, but we also want to see where you plan on going forward. So don't just give us your CV and a list of your past accomplishments. You want to go into detail on what you intend to do going forward and how Boren can be a step in that direction. And I do want to linger on that point just a little bit. We do have that expectation that everyone fulfills some sort of federal service after you've come back from your time overseas and you finish your academic study. We at Boren are not going to assign you a role. Like, we're not giving you a government job. You still need to do the research, as I've mentioned before. Think about agencies, think about roles that make sense for you. You still need to write your own resume and submit your own applications. But we do have a lot of resources to help you with that job search. We say it's a service commitment, but we really like to think of it as a service opportunity, because Boren can be an incredible launch pad if you are genuinely thinking about public service and about serving at least part of your career within the federal government. Boren can be a great assist, a really strong foot in the door to help get you down the road towards those federal service ambitions. So we do want to see in your essay that you've given real thought towards those ambitions, and that you recognize, how that essay one issue could be something that you can address through an agency or number of agencies at some point in your professional career. Finally, if you have any questions, if you ever want to reach out to us, feel free to do so. That's our primary address there in DC. Feel free to send us an email, boren@iie.org. Feel free to give us a phone call, 1-800-618-NCEP. That rings like 6 different phones, including this one, so someone will get back to you. Our website is full of information, more information about both of our essays, about the rest of the Boren application, about the countries Borens go to, the languages they learn, things like that. We're on Facebook, so feel free to follow us there. Same with Twitter. Our YouTube page has a lot of great testimonials and first-person experiences from past Borens. We're also on Instagram. We're not on Snapchat because we're too old, and we're not on TikTok because we don't dance, but we're pretty much everywhere else. So feel free to follow, like, and subscribe. And that's it for me.
Great. Thank you so much, Kyle. We have some really great questions coming in for you. So I might just start with those. Let's see. Does wanting further education after Boren lessen the impact of potential for federal employment interests?
That's a fantastic question. So our awards fall into 2 categories, basic categories. There's the scholarship for undergrad students and the fellowship for grad students. And we do recognize that for both of those groups, there's definitely the potential to want to go back to school at some point in your future plans. And that's totally fine with us. Matter of fact, let me be explicit with the timeline when it comes to federal service. So say you're in school now, either undergrad, graduate, PhD, you must go on your Boren experience while you are still a student. You graduate after you've come back. Say you've graduated from your undergraduate degree, so you're a scholar. You now have up to 3 years to get started on that federal service. And in that 3-year time span, you can do any number of things, including going back to school. And if you do go back to school, the clock will actually stop, allow you to finish that program, and then resume after you've completed that additional degree. So say you go to grad school for your master's, you're working on your master's for 2 or 3 years, that 3-year window will actually pause, allow you to finish that degree, and then resume once you've been conferred that additional level of certification or whatever the case might be. Same rule for higher degrees. Say you're a grad student, but you want to go get your PhD, the clock will stop, resume once you finish that degree. But unfortunately, with fellows, with grad students who won the Boren, you don't have a 3-year period, you've got a 2-year period. Unfortunately, fellows, we just, for some reason, expect you to know what you want to do with your lives and kind of have a leg up when it comes to looking for careers. So you only have a 2-year gap after you finished your studies. But same rule, if you go back for more studies, the clock will stop, and then you can fulfill your service after you're done.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you for such a thorough answer. I'm sure that is really helpful to everyone tuning in. So you had touched on this a bit already in terms of getting a job in the federal government following your Boren. And you mentioned that the Boren staff would not select the type of job, but rather those who've done Boren would seek those opportunities. Is a job in the federal government guaranteed after the Boren scholarship?
Another really insightful question. So we guarantee nothing, right? Like we're not guaranteeing that you're going to get a job, but we're going to make that process as easy as possible. Like we are trying to help you as much as we can. The office from the DoD that actually oversees Boren is the National Security and Education Program, NCEP. They have a team of past Borens. I believe there's 8 of them. They will be your direct point of contact. They help with resume writing. They help with interview prep. they have their own job board, nsepnet.org, where they post jobs that come across their desk. Some of those jobs will be Boren exclusive, like government agencies are looking for Boren specifically and send the posting to NSEP to post on NSEPnet. We have a Boren forum, that's like our Boren Alumni Association. They're phenomenal at networking because sometimes when it comes to jobs, including in the government, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And so making those key Boren networks, especially within the Boren forum, that's fantastic. We have certain authorities that help on the back end. One that you may already know if you're interested in government work is I believe it's called Section A. Where it kind of like front lists you in a way. It's kind of on par as if you've already had an entry level position in the government. So like a lot of positions where it's like, oh, you need an entry level, you need prior experience in government work. That authority kind of like covers that. They see Boren as prior experience in government work. We actually every year, it's funny that I'm getting to this point because it ended today. We have a 2-day seminar where we give you all sorts of tips and tricks. We work with NSEP to like tell you about security clearances and polygraph testing, and we bring in HR people from various agencies to talk about what makes an ideal candidate for their agency. And just today, it ended 5 o'clock today. We had a virtual job fair. We had, I think, 35 agencies at the job fair today. And past Borens were able to go from virtual booth to virtual booth, sitting in their, business dress from the waist up at least, with their resumes and meet with recruiters from these different agencies. It literally ended 5 p.m. Eastern today. So again, nothing's guaranteed, but I think it's some tiny number. It's like 3% of Borens do not find a way to fulfill their service because we're trying to give you as many advantages as we can to get you into government service.
No, thank you for that. Really incredible to hear kind of how Boren has switched to the virtual world as well. And so kind of providing these networking opportunities. That's really great. Another question that came in is, and I think this will be helpful for everyone. What is the most common mistake made by applicants on Boren essay number 2?
Easy answer. Don't make it clear that you're committed to government service. Like, leave your plans for government service super open-ended. Like I said before, like, oh, I just want to work for the Department of State. Doing what? There's like a bajillion sub-agencies within the Department of State. You got to give us a specific office and how it fits into your long-term plans. And we need to see that this is something you're actually interested in and passionate about. If the reviewers reading our essays have any reason to doubt that you are actually interested in fulfilling service and that you will actually be committed to doing government service when you've come back, like, you're done, you're toast. That application is a sitting duck. So the biggest pothole, I think, for SA2 is just not making it clear that you've got that commitment to federal service and showing that you've thought through places where a student with your background and your interests would then want to work in the government.
Thank you. Yeah, that's super helpful. Another point that you had talked about during your presentation was that there's opportunities within some of the preferred federal agencies for those with STEM backgrounds. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on that, maybe give some examples of the type of STEM roles in those agencies. I know that can often be a deterrent to people applying to these type of programs. And so would love to hear a little bit more about that.
You've asked the one question that always stumps me because I'm not always like great with like listing specific jobs, but I mean, what major government organization doesn't need engineers, doesn't need chemists, doesn't need in a world where climate issues are front and center for so many governments, like every one of those priority agencies is doing something that's related to changing in the environment, changing in biology, weather issues. So I mean, just, be thoughtful and considerate about like what the government does. If you're coming from a medical background, Health and Human Services, CDC, kind of obvious one in this day and age. Like you just gotta like really stop and think, what does the government do and where can I see myself working? And if you're coming from a STEM background, you probably have some sort of expertise in a particular field that you could probably leverage in a unique and convincing way. I wish I could give you a more thoughtful answer. Go back to that the website that I'd mentioned earlier. Go to our borenawards.org and the federal careers tab. Go take a scroll through the federal agencies that we've connected to on that page. I'm sure you'll see something that's related to STEM. I guarantee it.
No, that's great. Thank you so much. Another question for those who are considering applying to a Boren in the future at some point, what types of experiences would help someone gain a Boren award and be able to pursue Boren scholarship?
Where to begin? Everything I'm about to say are recommended but not required. So if you don't tick these boxes, don't freak out. We're looking for students who are willing to go overseas long term. So we have a strong preference for going overseas for as long as possible, 6 months or more. So think about whatever background demonstrates an ability to go overseas and like not go crazy or do something ridiculous. Your cultural adaptability, leadership qualities, being comfortable in new experiences. Also, we're thinking about students who are committed to particular career trajectories. So prior internships that are relevant to a national security issue, that's big. For most languages, there's no prerequisite for the language. You can come in at novice, beginner, any level of language learning, but it does often help if you've demonstrated that you've had some prior exposure to the language. Or just any language, really. Like the fact that you are just committed to learning language at all. Again, not required for most languages, but certainly reflects well. Diversity. If we are trying to give as accurate a representation of the US demographics as we possibly can within our study abroad cohorts, so whatever you can demonstrate that makes you stick out, race, gender, economic background, region of the country, type of collegiate institution, like whatever your diversity factor is, if you can differentiate yourself from the rest of the pool, good idea to do so. It's what immediately comes to my mind.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you. And I know during the CLS presentation, we had chatted a bit about essentially presenting yourself as an ambassador, someone who can represent the United States abroad, and then bring kind of that back. And what you were just saying to your last piece about, what differentiates you, I feel like that's kind of in line. So I'm wondering, like, what are your thoughts in terms of this essay number 2, in terms of how to present yourself, how to best present yourself as an ambassador abroad?
That is an interesting question. We don't, how do I say? We don't put a huge emphasis on the ambassadorship that you'll do soft power while you're overseas. That's not really explicitly something that we prioritize, but it is like important to us that we're sending students overseas who will reflect the country well. And if you can reflect some sort of diversity, change someone's interpretation of what an American might look like, that's great. Like we would consider that a net win every time. So while your ability to reflect the United States isn't something that we're like overstating, if that's something you can work into your essay, the one thing that gives me pause there, these essays are typically not very long, 800 words a piece. I think we give 1,000 words for the fellows for essay 2, but even 1,000 words, you'll be surprised how fast that goes. And so because we're not explicitly asking for you to tell us, this is how I'll reflect the United States while I'm abroad, If you can't squeeze it into your essay, just take it out, because there'll be other things that we are asking you to explain, and we wouldn't want you to sacrifice something we are asking you to explain to squeeze that in. But if you can squeeze it in, good idea. I would, yeah, sure.
That's great. Thank you. Good to know how to kind of differentiate between these different types of essays for different fellowships. We have time for just one or two more questions. One question is, if you're uncertain about your longer term plans or your longer term career goals, even your medium career goals, you know, it's something that might not be clear when you're thinking about this application. How do you suggest applicants kind of go about that uncertainty?
Excellent question. So the most important thing I can say to answer this question is think about your application holistically, right? Think about how your essay won that national security issue that we're asking you to talk about, which is always, you know, something that's of US interest in that country, in that region, based on that language. You're going to want to pick an issue that ties to your academic background, and then work that issue into your essay too, and say people who deal with this sort of issue work in these sorts of fields. And even if you're not 100% sure that you're actually gonna end up working in that field, if you can just give us a cohesive, coherent, logical essay one and essay two and your prior academic experiences and the kinds of things that you're looking for in your future all make sense, you're off to a great start. And one thing that's really important, your essay is not a contract. So no one's coming back to you 10 years down the road to say, hey, your essay 2 said you were going to be a foreign service officer, and now we see you working for the TSA. What happens? Give us our Boren money back. No one's ever going to do that. So even if you do end up on a different career path than what you, one of the directors at NCEP, actually, she said this in a presentation just earlier today. She wrote one thing in her application and then ended up working for NCEP. So we're not like holding it like a contract, but we do want to see that you've given real thought to what you might want to do and how what you might want to do makes sense for you based on your academic background and what you're passionate about.
Thank you. That's so helpful. I think, you know, what you just said in terms of really forming a cohesive narrative, finding a common thread to connect all of this is so critical to these types of fellowship personal statements and similar essays. At this point, I'm going to kick it back to Sean, who is helping run the We Represent conference. But before then, just want to say thank you so much, Kyle. And Eileen had to drop, but also both presentations were so useful. And I hope those in attendance were able to gain a lot of knowledge during these discussions.